Thanks for coming, everyone. Welcome to the horse barn that we're in. There's some seats in the front, so if there's some more stragglers as they are looking for a seat, maybe try to point them towards the front. But thanks for coming. My name is Prairie. I'm with Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Hopefully we have a good afternoon worth of some graphics and just kind of give you a good status update on where we're at as a program statewide. So I guess we will go ahead and get started. For the most part, if you could try to ask questions as they come up, that would be great. That way you don't forget them. Hopefully we don't get too bogged down on any one topic, but we have a lot to cover. We have some guest presenters and some of our geoconference here to answer some of those GIS questions as well. So. Today we're going to talk kind of about where we're at with next-gen updates, covering all of the portions that go into next-gen. We're going to talk about the last legislative session very briefly. Hopefully we don't get bogged down there too much, but talk about some of those changes to the legislation and the rules, and then talk about some of the carryover grant materials, and then updated forms and just some other housekeeping items that might be of interest to you guys. So we're really going to dive right in here. Looking across the state at who has SIP-capable CPE equipment, it's really, really good. It's about 90 to 95% of the PSAPs in the state of Iowa have SIP-capable equipment. I think that's a huge step forward from where we were at last year. For those in the back, I apologize for the screen and the size of the graphics. I will post this online on Homeland Security and Emergency Management's website, as well as send them all out after this. So hopefully you can take a look at them there as well. But the greenish color is the PSAPs that have SIP-capable equipment. And then the yellows are the PSAPs that have scheduled upgrades. And the green, or I'm sorry, the orange counties have funds committed through the carryover grant. So we're kind of tracking where those counties are at as well in that process. The next one has a little bit more white on it, but it's still making vast improvements just in the last few weeks. These are the PSAPs in counties that are SIP enabled. So that's the IP receiving calls over IP through their CPE. And again, the green is the PSAPs that have upgraded to SIP and receiving SIP calls. The yellow is what we have scheduled. So we still have a little bit of ways to go, but definitely a good start. Definitely making progress towards those next-gen upgrades. And we did these maps a week or two ago, so I know there was a couple that I'm showing that on all of these maps that progress continued last week that may or may not be captured, just depending on when those upgrades happen. These are the counties that are receiving text messages through the web, the GEM web browser. There's 9 PSAPs right now. Fayette has both of their PSAPs receiving text messages. We're going to get into a text discussion a little bit later, but I just kind of wanted to show you that status update on a statewide basis of where we're at. Data center upgrades. I know Barb talked about this quite a bit before her retirement, and we continued those. We're still in the process of moving the Newton data center to Davenport for geodiversity reasons. So basically too close to West Des Moines should there be a major disaster. So we're in the process of doing that. And I'm kind of going back and hopefully doing a little bit of education with you in this portion to show where we're moving to and how it all interconnects and relates. So once we officially cut over to the Davenport data center, we have to do 2 software upgrades to both data centers. We have to basically get to catch all of the software up to where we need to be, and at that point, we will be able to deliver text messages, and it's called MSRP, Message Session Relay Protocol. That is kind of the text equivalent to SIP, if you will. That will allow text message to come integrated, like everyone wants, through the call taker stream. And so that's kind of where we're going. That's what's holding us up, if you will, and being able to deliver that integrated text that we know everyone wants. So, speaking of text 911, MSRP, like I said, is the MENA I3 solution for integrated text messages. I showed you the slide that had the 9 PSAPs that are receiving it through the web browser. I'm glad we started that process. It's worked out some of the kinks as far as what we have to do to notify the FCC and working through the testing with the wireless carriers. FCC has made it quite easy for that process to occur. It used to take a letter to all of the wireless carriers on behalf of each and every one of the PSAPs saying that they are now ready to receive text. So that, is 5 or 6 letters for each PSAP, and there's 114 of you guys, so that's a lot of letters telling wireless carriers we're now ready for text. Now, it is a simple form that gets sent to the FCC. It basically asks for about 4 or 5 pieces of information. I send that into the FCC. The wireless carriers are responsible for monitoring that website. And when they see that your county is now ready for text, they will reach out to you and coordinate the testing of the text service in that area. The caveat to that, and there's a couple of them, you do have to be SIP enabled. We can deliver text through the GEM web browser. You do not have to be SIP enabled for that. But to receive integrated text messages, you have to be SIP enabled. And that also means that your CPE vendor has to have tested with TCS and make sure they're capable of receiving those integrated text messages as well. Working through our office, we kind of came up with a rollout plan. Black Hawk County will be the first PSAP to go live with that integrated text messaging. Of course, everyone knows they were the first in the nation to receive text messages in general, so we're going to make them first to receive integrated through the MSRP and through the statewide ESINet. And the goal is to have all PSAPs SIP enabled and receiving integrated text by July 1st, 2016. So that's coming up. That's why this slide is important to get green quickly. A couple other things just along that testing that I mentioned. You can see the list of CPE vendors up there that have completed that interoperability testing with TCS. And then you can also see those that are in progress. So again, that's kind of CPE dependent, or I'm sorry, vendor dependent on making sure they have the software and the capability of delivering and receiving that MSRP feed. A few more things on text. In April, this past April, from our office as part of 911 month, our press release contained information about, we call it the pilot program for text. It's basically those counties that we're going to be receiving the GEM web browser. So it basically just referred to the pilot program. It didn't even mention the counties. The counties that have received the GEM web browser and are receiving text, for the most part, have done their own local press releases, and that's great. And in fact, that's what we're going to continue to do when you start receiving integrated text. We'll let you guys do your own local media. If you want to do it on a county-by-county basis or a regional basis, that's your guys' call. At some point, we will do a press release as well once we have the entire state rolled out. We do have some resources for best practices and some sample press releases that you can use to release to your local media if you want to. And then the final bullet there is, every call taker screen, depending on the vendor, is going to look a little bit different. So that's really up to your vendor on how that training to your dispatchers is going to look, how they want to do that, how you want to do that. That's, you can Google a lot of that information to kind of see what your call taker screen might look like. I was able to see the TCS CPE screen, the call taker screen, and it's kind of like, it looks just like a regular call coming in, or it's a text message, and you can have the pre-canned messages for the most part, at least on the display that they showed me. That's the last slide that I have on text. Is there any questions on that process, that rollout, where we're going, your responsibilities, our responsibilities? Yes.
I have a question, because we're just starting, I'm doing training this coming Thursday, and we've been practicing, but for the counties that have had it longer than 9 counties, are you getting any text to 911 other than what you're doing for testing? Anybody?
We got one accident, and we texted back, and they didn't answer us, because it was basically an away person, and we think we even texted, but we did not get any emails.
I don't see Tim a lot from Cedar. I know they did a press release, and not too long after that, they had a real text to 911, and it was kind of a scenario that I don't know that I had thought about. It was a man that was texting 911 that was with his work friends, and his somewhat hysterical girlfriend was at home threatening to kill herself, and he didn't want to make it a big deal in front of his work friends, so he got more comfortable texting. That was one that I hadn't thought of, but it was a successful outcome.
And then my other question is, I know we're going to get a press release, we're going to go with Boyd County, go next, same press release. But are we responsible to, one of the dispatchers says, oh, we need to get this to the schools, we need to get it to the factories. Is a press release good enough? Are we responsible to contact all these other places and let them know, or?
No, we haven't done much yet for texting awareness, but it's probably something good for you guys to do. And it's, I'll remind you, from 34, the changes to 34A, there's money available to do that public information now as well.
Will we be required to sign an agreement with any of these companies, or what's the cost going to be for stepping that hard on those of us that are stipulated now?
So any costs would be on your CPE vendor side if there's costs for software upgrades or training. As far as getting the text from the wireless carriers or just through the EZNet, there's no cost. So that's going to be on a PSAP by PSAP basis. Any other questions? One of the other projects we've been working on, that you may have heard about, is a secondary ESINet. Basically, there was a large outage in 2013, and our director wanted to create a totally redundant, separate ESINet. So we are doing that. We are basically using all Windstream fiber, so separate from the ICN, separate circuits, separate everything. And basically, if there's an outage on the primary ESINet, it will automatically alt route to one of the 13 PSAPs that have been identified to answer calls on the secondary ESINet. This is an initiative that got started before I came on board, but it is basically the 13 largest PSAPs. Actually, there's a diagram that basically just, you won't even notice the difference. And in fact, we did maintenance in Blackhawk County, which is one of the sites for the secondary ESINet. The primary ESINet was down while they were doing that maintenance, and wireless calls still came in on the secondary ESINet. And these are the counties that those entry points for the secondary ESINet. The counties in red still have to be completed. The ones in green are in place.
So my understanding is the primary ESINet goes down, all traffic will be routed to one of those PSAPs?
Correct. The question is if the primary ESINet is down, all the traffic go to those 13? Correct. All right, this is last year's map, and this was a map that I passed around at one of the council meetings a couple months ago. It shows the amounts that were spent on the 2015 carryover grant, so that's the year that ended in June. So green is good, you spent a lot of money. Red is amazing because you spent over $100,000, but that's because you have multiple PSAPs, so you're still good. And you can see the other colors in there as well. This is going to be really hard to read in the back, and I apologize. Again, these slides I'll get on the website and then send out to your emails as well. But it basically, it shows the same thing as the last map did, it just shows the dollars that you spent. I don't know if it already is, I will make sure it's there. I know, like I said, it's been circulated a couple times, a couple different places, but I'm not sure if it's on our website. And so far, here's the usage of the 2016 carryover grant. So no individual dollar amounts, we're not going to report that at this point because the grant's still active, but you can see who has requested traditional carryover grants so far, and the total is around $5 million. So again, not looking too bad. A little bit less than half the year has gone by so far, so still doing good there. And then, again, this year we offered 2 grants for the carryover. The traditional fund, that's $100,000, just like the last couple of years, and then a $15,000 carryover grant for GIS-specific purposes. And we're about to get into some of that GIS stuff, but you can see some of the counties that have requested that grant, and about $500,000 has been spent there. Should there be a carryover grant in 2017, and we don't need to get into some of that politics now, I really don't want to. The intent, just so you know, if there is a carryover grant, is to try to update the process a little bit, make it an online process, versus the Excel spreadsheet. So, instead of emailing me or mailing me the materials that you need, you basically just upload them. We use this MB3 program. Some of the emergency managers are probably familiar with that. It's how we're going to be managing some of our other grants next year as well. So for the emergency managers that have an account, you'll be familiar with it. For everyone else, we'll put together a comprehensive training package. It really shouldn't be too difficult for you. 911 council travel, by the way, for those council members, will hopefully be done the same way next year as well, and this year as well already. And with that, John Bailey from our office is here to talk some GIS stuff.
Good afternoon. I'm going to start with the GIS grant. As Blake showed that map, about $600,000 spent on the GIS grant already. It's really good use of funds, but let's spend more, so please use it. That money goes towards any of your data, maintenance, remediation, creation, etc. So keep submitting those GIS grant applications. Currently where we're at is we've had a couple good years working with GeoCom, and a lot of folks have been doing a lot of work with their local GIS or their other vendors on bringing their data up to date and basically editing your data so it can hopefully be used in a 911 system, next-gen 911 system in the future. So counties right now should be actively remediating your data, working on that information so it gets up to a high, accurate 98% standard. From GeoCom, our friends, I guess I should introduce Deb Rosaboom from GeoCom, Christy Hayes from GeoCom. As we go through some of these bullets, they can answer some more questions if you have in-depth questions. But our field mapping spreadsheets that you've been submitting to this team from GeoCom, 81 are turned in as of October, so that's a pretty good number, only 18 to go. That really helps GeoCom with some of the heavy lifting they're doing for this program and for the state. Like developing workflows and the ETL processes. So, taking data from 100 plus PSAPs and then trying to figure out a way to turn it into one statewide layer that we can use. It does require some expertise and a lot of time. And so this team has been working on that. That's been ongoing work since last year. And our GIS committee, which I saw, Sharice was in the building. She's on our GIS committee. We have gone through and figured out some of the spatial components of the standards, and they're waiting on me to finish writing the standards. So Nina just came up with an address point standard where we should place that point at the end of September. And so in November we'll have an update to our GIS standards, and that'll basically include the spatial components as well. All right, so where are we going? We're moving fast with this GIS work. In December, we hope that you have all of your data, GIS data, turned into GeoCom. The original, I guess the original ask was it October, November? It was past even. So we knew that everybody needed some extra time. So this December, if you can have your updated GIS information sent to the Geocom. That'll help with our work moving forward. Then in March, Geocom plans to deliver all of our assessments. In March as well, they're going to start looking at all of your data, putting it into one statewide layer, and then loading the data into their system in St. Cloud. So the GeoLink system is going to come online for us next year. And so with that, I don't know, I put spring 2016 on here because I wasn't sure of dates, but we're going to do training on the system and kind of get everybody acclimated to working with it. I know they're working with other states, so this isn't new to them, it's new to us. So if you're a Geocom customer, it's going to be a little easier for you, I would imagine. And so where we're going to is, just because we get through this phase doesn't mean it's over, like, oh good, my data's in, it's over. You have to keep working on it. You know, the life is dynamic and ever changing, so your GIS data will be the same. We'll be adding new roads, new residences, new points, so maybe there'll be a boundary change as well. We get a lot of questions, and Blake will usually forward me some questions from the e911@iowa.gov inbox, and I'll be doing something else, but hey, we gotta talk about this really quick. And a lot of them have to do with your MSA or the GIS grant. Some of it's data maintenance. We look at statewide imagery, DPS and DOT's mock product, and we'll get into, this is kind of our Q&A slide, but I wanted this to be kind of an open time right now for any GIS questions to get them out of the way if you have them. I'll give you a quick update on mock. I'll go bottom up because I think that most of the questions will come back to our Geocom team. But mock is not an open system, if you will, that we have any control over. So we've talked to the DOT about kind of where they're at with mock, and right now, from what I understand, it's not something we can do to make mock openly available to all the PSAPs. That's been a question asked by a few people. But we'll continue to work with them, and as that system maybe changes, matures, what have you, we'll keep everybody apprised of where it's at. Statewide imagery. We fully intend this year to put an RFP for statewide imagery. We need a statewide comprehensive look of what Iowa looks like when you start looking at putting roads and address points and all these, editing data. We need to understand what's underneath a good base map. And people are using the carryover grant for imagery, and the program really just doesn't have that backdrop. And so if we intend to be a next-gen system, we need statewide imagery or something behind it. And so we intend on putting out an RFP for that yet this year. And then, we'll get to the MSA questions. If you have any questions, ask them now. Otherwise, I'm going to hand the mic to Deb, and she can make any blanket statements. Good deal. Remember, we would like your data by December, the PSAP data, so we can start working on putting together this statewide data layer. And then, there's going to be ongoing working with your neighbors and whatnot. But hand the mic to Deb.
Thank you. So as John mentioned, there's a couple of questions. There's a lot of questions that have come up through the project, and we wanted to list a couple of them and just talk through it to start with, to kind of get the ball rolling for any other questions that may come up individually. One of the things that a lot of people have asked is, you've gotten your remediation results, your analysis results back, and you're starting to look through the data and make improvements, and maybe you're noticing a trend that instead of the GIS data needing an update, it's the MSA that's an error. And so maybe you have quite a few MSAG updates that need to be processed. So we've had questions come up that say, do I actually need to make these MSAG changes? Because one of the most common sort of catchphrases that came up initially with NextGen is that the MSAG is going away. And the reality is that while eventually the MSAG will go away and the form and function of it will be replaced by the street centerline in your GIS, that doesn't mean that it's an immediate process. It doesn't mean it's going to happen in the next year or even the next 2 years. We don't have a timeline for when the MSAG will actually drift off and no longer need to be maintained. And the transition to NextGen is just that. It's going to be a transition that takes place over time, could be quite a bit of time. And so in the meantime, while you're improving your GIS data, you need to make those corrections to your MSAG because the importance is keeping everything in sync. So even though it may be a sort of painful process depending on how you can go about it, the MSAG changes do need to be made at the same time as GIS, or if the GIS is correct and the MSAG needs to be updated, those will need to be processed. And sometimes you can organize it as a larger special project with an analyst that you work with at your database provider. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, one entry at a time, data entry type of situation, but it would just need to be explored as a special project in that case. But that was just a question that we did get several times was, if the MSAG is going away, do I really need to make all of these changes? And I know people want to hear no, but the answer is yes. And at least for the foreseeable future, you do need to maintain your MSAG alongside and in sync with your GIS data. So I don't know if that prompted any other questions along that line, or any other follow-up? People want to know? Yes?
How about the individual alley database records
Yes.
that now are incorrect because the street's name's been updated or whatever the case is? Who makes those changes? Do we submit the changes? Do they?
So your database provider, the question is what about the alley? If I make an MSAG update, what about the alley? And in the system, those two are typically maintained at the same place at the database provider. So say it's CenturyLink or Intrado. You are working with them, you make an MSAG change. That change will apply then over onto the alley records. It doesn't always, I think there may be some follow-up directly back to the telco that most often falls to the database provider to do, but you know, whether or not that happens, that you may need to do a little more follow-up. But typically when you make an MSAG change, that translates over to the alley just by nature of them being maintained by the same entity. So then it goes along the same lines. I talked a lot about MSAG updates, but some of the assessment results that you saw were pure alley comparisons. So we took your alley database, compared it to your points, compared it to your streets, and there may be just individual alley records as well that need an update outside of the full MSAG entry. So they will both need to be investigated and updated. Yeah.
I don't know if that pertains to what you're saying. I don't know if y'all are going to talk about it later. What are some of the ETL processes you have in place from the county level so you don't have redundancy in GIS work from us to you?
So there was an earlier slide that mentioned the ETL process. So just to talk a little bit more about that is that we've been talking about field mapping spreadsheets. So field mapping spreadsheets are the way that we craft our ETL process, which is extract, transform, load. What it is we know what the state data model is, and you know what your local data model is. We need to know how does your local data, your center lines, your address points, and your boundary layers, and all of the schema in those layers, how does that map to the state? So we sent out the field mapping spreadsheet for you to fill that out with local knowledge, because when we did the assessment, we could do our best guess, or our best estimate of how that mapping would take place, but the local knowledge knows the actual mapping. So we ask you to fill it out, we then take that spreadsheet, and using that, we build the ETL automated process so that on into the future, every time that you upload data, you don't, as long as you have not changed your schema in the interim, it uploads to us, we validate it, make sure that there's no issue, run it through the ETL to the state schema, and then continue on with QA/QC.
So it's up to us manually to upload it, like to an FTP, or you have something?
Yeah, that's the training that will be taking place in the spring, is the GeoLink system. It's, there's a GIS portal where you'll be given access and you'll be asked to provide your data on a regular basis. And part of the workflows that we craft will give some structure around how often we'll want to see that data, and then the turnaround times for when you provide it, what we do with it, all of the different steps, all of the different QA/QC processes, and then what type of report you can expect to get back. So that's the training that'll take place in the spring, and kind of feeds into one of the slides, I think it was one of the next questions, was just data maintenance on into the future. Is that we've done the first round of assessments, we're leading into the second round of assessments, but the reality is that this process of asking for your data, checking it for quality and reporting back, this is the future. This is repeatable over and over again throughout the rest of eternity. Not to be dramatic.
Which is normal.
Right.
And just one of the things, GIS parameters, we look, instead of doing things manually, we always try to do things, to automate.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of the emergency management coordinators, 911 folks, they have GIS people, they're going to rely on them to help maintain the data. I'm looking for, because that's just another aspect of what we have to do from a GIS standpoint. And I'm just looking from a point of not having any redundancy to automate things. And if there's any possibility of where you say you want data, yeah, you can have any data you want, we don't care. It's just a matter of, is it our responsibility to have to upload it manually, or can we automate it to make the ETL process as smooth and quick as possible?
And we've had conversations a couple different ways about this, and the team is always looking for ways to make it easier on the counties to provide the data. So the way that it's set up right now is, you could set up an automated process that would prepare the data, extract it, put it somewhere, and then your only step would be essentially to take that extracted bundle of data and upload to a browser. If there's a way that we can look to make it even eliminate that step and have a spot that it could just, export to automatically, it's something that we're looking at. We don't have a solution in place right now, but it has been asked a couple times, and it's something that we're looking at. So you would, essentially, you have it automated up until that final step of the human interaction of just uploading the file, the bundle of data. And then the ALI and the MSAG, we're also working on a process for how to get that on a regular basis, because along with checking the quality of the data itself internally is, of course, the ongoing synchronization checks against the MSAG and ALI, making sure that those match rates are improving.
I'd like some clarification. So the GIS training that's going to occur in the spring needs to be attended by our county GIS folks?
The GIS folks are likely going to be the ones that are tasked with providing the data. So they would be the ones, and we're still looking at the structure of that training. If it's going to be gather everybody in one room, at the same time offer it through, say, like a go-to meeting or webinar type of session for those that can't travel. We're looking at exactly how that's going to be structured, just because of the vast amount of people that we need to reach, right?
Yeah.
And then also potentially recording it, having it be available, maybe follow-up sessions. There's a lot of things that we need to put into that to structure it the best way it needs to be for Iowa. But yeah, that's what the spring session is going to be, and your GIS people being involved would be key, because they're the ones you're going to be relying on.
And so I understood this correctly as well, then you'll have a quarterly test of the data or comparison of the data to see that it's
It could
the
be
same?
It could be monthly. I think we talked this through. We would like to see the data from every county at a minimum of monthly.
Okay.
Some counties, it can be a struggle to get it once a year or twice a year. It's how harsh the language is around that is not really for me to say, but we will begin the discussion at asking for the data on a monthly basis.
And when that data is transferred back and forth, that will involve like new street additions and stuff like that maybe the state isn't aware of? Or does GIS already transmit that to the state?
So each
Right.
time when you get your data, it would have the whatever the latest that's in there for your subdivisions, your new streets, your changes.
Okay.
And then the latest data that is provided is then what is swapped out in the statewide layers.
Okay.
So if you provide it every month like clockwork, then as we run our processes and then incorporate that into the statewide layers, and then that is made available also on the same site for download, it will have the latest as of the latest that everybody has provided,
Okay.
essentially.
All right, great.
Yeah. Yes.
Just remember when you think of that, monthly, we haven't had a new street in our county for 5 years.
Yeah.
And everybody keeps saying, well, I need this because they're gonna update the streets, and I'm like, that'd be right if we had streets.
Right.
We don't.
Well, the opposite is the same for us. We have a new street every week.
Yeah, since we don't.
Yeah. So if it doesn't work for your county, then don't do it, but.
And that all goes to the workflow. There are different people, it's going to affect in different ways. If you don't have the development, then yeah, we're not going to demand that you provide it over and over again. But there could be other changes, there could be slight boundary changes, there could be changes to address points here or there, a new structure going up, one being torn down. Every little change gets inflated into the statewide layers. These are really good questions. And I hear some discussion going on. Is there any other active questions? Yes? I'm gonna have to come to you. No, just the question was, if you're providing the data, do you also have to provide a map of where it is? The data itself will tell us where those changes are. So you are providing the newest set of your street center line layer or your address point layer. And if you've made those changes, you have already added them in. We are not taking one development at a time and manually editing the data. We are taking what you provide and checking the quality of it and then reporting back. So no, you wouldn't need to provide any building plans or individual street maps or anything along with it. It's just the GIS data layers themselves. I'm back in this corner now. Anyone else can pick on? You guys got it covered?
Do you have what you think might be an ideal workflow? I'm guessing you found out in Iowa that 99 counties handle things 99 different ways. And, from our standpoint, there's a lot of places I think that 911 and GIS are two completely different places, and they're kind of melding together. Do you have an ideal workflow how you would like to see that information go back and forth between the state of Iowa and one program?
The workflows that we put together are focused on the gathering and the data quality, checking the data quality, reporting it back to you, giving you an idea of, for the next generation goals, this is where your data sits and how accurate it is compared to NENA standards and recommendations for accuracy. So we gather it, we report back to you, and then we make the statewide layers available for download. And then it's up to you and the systems that you have locally if you want to use your same local data unchanged, provisioned into your CPE and your dispatch systems, or if you actually want to take the statewide layers and instead begin using that. In a sense, it's the same data, it's your data, it has changed data models, so there would be changes in the system that would have to be worked out before you would just swap out to a totally new data set. But I'm not sure if I'm getting to your question, but the point is that you provide the data, we check the quality, we coalesce it into the statewide layers, and then we are primarily working with the GIS folks at each county, but then yes, you do have a relationship with your 911 counterparts for how that data then gets provisioned into the system. So then it really becomes a discussion between the two of you as to, do you want to maintain the layers provisioning locally as you have been, or is there a benefit to pulling the statewide layer in, because then you can include some of your surrounding counties. You could include the entire state if you desired, but you at a minimum would have regular updates of surrounding county data as well that could go into your system. So, yes, Stacey.
Deb, maybe just clarify, a lot of the counties, probably half the counties, we maintain and manage their data. So all of you that are sitting there will come up to me after and say, so who's we know our
Yes.
on both sides of the land and all of that. So you guys will just report to us from dispatch and where we have, basically have the street. We'll make the update and then we'll probably upload the data.
Yeah, that's a good point. The distinction between kind of how you currently work with geocommon maintenance capacity versus the new system. So thanks for pointing that out, Stacey.
Wanted to make sure.
Your inbox is going to get flooded. Yes, absolutely, email them to me. If you want to ask offline, Christy and I will be around for the remainder of the meeting and afterwards, and then Christy's got some things to say.
Blake and John can mention that we will have the second round of data from all the counties collected by December. If you're ready, if your county's ready to go and want that second assessment, we will definitely take that data now, and we will make sure we communicate via email those instructions. It will be similar to what we did last year, upload everything to the FTV site. So we'll get that information out to you too the next week.
I guess before I get going again, we've already covered quite a bit of ground. I kind of just want to make sure I didn't fly through it, make sure if you've had any time to think of any questions, going back to text or Ezinet or any of that stuff, don't feel free, or feel free to raise your hand. Whoops. I knew I had rather one cake. Go ahead.
You mentioned the state is going to put together an RFP for area voters.
Yes.
Would that be available to a county assessor? Because our county assessor is asked to use our funds, the grant funds, to do that. And because I think Floyd County's is 2010.
Yeah, John and I had a lot of discussions about this, and we were wondering if we should go a little bit more in depth today on this, so we might as well.
Yeah, so the intent of the statewide imagery would be that anybody can have the data. It's open public data. And so if you want your contiguous counties, if you want their information, you can have it. You can have any bit of that information. I know right now some people have agreements where they can get imagery from their neighboring counties and whatnot. But for this program, when we're looking at things from a statewide perspective, we need data that's available and then open. And so that's where we're going with both the GIS data and the imagery. And there will be a cost savings.
What, any idea what resolution you're looking at?
Right now, we're still kind of tossing it around. I talked with our CIO's office last week, and minimum would be starting would be a foot leaf off, 1 foot imagery, won't leaf off, which is from what we've seen from other states, more than adequate for the 911 program. If there's a push that a lot of people want 6-inch imagery, we're going to explore some options for doing that maybe in urban areas, because I don't know that we need 6-inch imagery of front fields in rural Iowa. It drives the cost of the imagery up quite a bit. So we're looking at things from the E911 perspective right now versus there are obviously other interests in a county. So it's going to be open. There's still some discussion on how we're going to do it. And we've also started working on a survey that includes who you work with for your GIS vendors. And we'll probably put a couple questions in there about imagery, so you'll see that here in November. Does that answer your question for the most part? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, if we could just make a couple of comments about imagery. I agree with what imagery is good for getting locations of emergency or something like that. But in our comm center, we have geocom, we have DLT images. We find those very useful. The higher resolution is really helpful when we're looking at buildings. There's a lot of things we would use them for in the PSAP, other than just locating emergencies and that sort of thing, where the higher resolution might be beneficial.
Yeah. And really the only issue with resolution is cost right now. Because the higher the resolution, there's more cost. I know a lot of you are paying it for your county imagery contracts, and it's not cheap either. So I hope you understand you're spending the money now. Anything else?
I know it's part of the discussion yet, but example, if we want 1 foot imagery and somebody wanted 6-inch imagery, are we talking about a subsidy or something?
Well, what we've talked about is if there was like some type of an imagery program where you could buy up. So if we just say, all right, the 911 program for our use, we'll just throw this out as an example. 1 foot leaf off is more than adequate for most of the state for 911 use, day-to-day kind of use. There's obviously going to be other uses where you might want higher resolution imagery, and maybe like other states would provide a place where you can buy up. So this is the baseline. If you come up with $12,000 or whatever that number, I'm just throwing it out there, you can get 6-inch imagery. If you come up with this amount of money, you can get 3-inch imagery. We still have to decide how far we want to go with the statewide imagery program. But what we have now is just, it's all over the place in Iowa, and we need something within this program as we start putting all our data together. we need something to put base.
John, how often do you think that you will fly then?
I don't know. There's a lot of, we'll just say there's a lot of things way above my pay grade going on with this program. So you know, we're looking right now at just getting something, and we did have money in for the next 6 years. So you know, if we flew every 3 years, you'd have 2 statewide products, which could be potential savings for a lot of families. I saw a hand up in the back.
Do we have an approximate date of when this is going to take effect?
No, we're going to look at hopefully getting an RFP out here. We kind of just got the green light on this and decided we'd move on this here this winter. So that's our plan. Any other questions?
All right, thank you. Any other questions that we've talked about so far before we move into everyone's favorite topic? All right. Changes to 34A. That was a fun legislative session last year. So let's talk about what did get accomplished. Everyone, I think, is aware of that. Basically, the carryover fund, the operating surplus, was opened up to the receipt and disposition of the 911 call. So that mirrors the language that is used elsewhere when talking about surcharge for both wireline and wireless. And we made those changes kind of reflecting on the carryover grant application as well. So if there are sites at towers or outside of the PSAP, you can now use that carryover grant for those type of projects. I think our message is still the priority is to work towards the next gen upgrades, SIP and CPD upgrades, but those other possibilities are out there for you now. The statewide radio system, that was passed. And $100,000 approved for council travel and public education. That's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier. In the past, council travel has came out of the administration fund part of the account. That has its own separate portion now, as well as public education. Sorry, I missed this one. Receiving this position, I kind of covered this already a little bit. The traditional fund, grant committee was left at $100,000. However, when you factor in the GIS portion of the grant, it's really $115,000 now available. And really kind of our message, again, we have priorities for the use of that fund, but it can be basically used any way, or the way that you use your other types of surcharge funding. So again, tower upgrades allowable, radio software upgradable to P25 are now possible after you've upgraded your CP type equipment. And remember that application, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet, and that's why I kind of talked about in the future, if the grant still exists, it'll be an online process, but it's basically a spreadsheet, has a couple different tabs along the bottom. We gave you some authorized uses. We had a lot of questions about what types of equipment were allowed and what was not. So we just kind of put them on paper to help folks out and decide what they could do with those.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That's going to be MB3.
What's that?
That's going to be on MB3.
That's where we're moving all of our grant
Working
towards.
on that to get better, because I've used it several times, and I then can't use it.
Yes. What county are you with?
Vancouver.
Okay. Yeah, we continue to work on it as well. I guess I thought from the user perspective, what you had available to do was a lot better than what we have to deal with on like the admin side of things, but that's not the case.
Security folks are wonderful. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been accomplished.
Okay.
Thank you to you, but
Yeah.
it's been problematic for me.
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, if there is going to be a carryover grant, we're definitely going to make sure to get out some screenshots and some tutorials to help folks out. But I'm not sure how much longer we can continue to submit faxes of paperwork either. So, and that's the system that we have right now for grants.
That's what I had to do in MB3. I had to do it and send it to somebody in Homeland Security, and they put it on, because it won't go on in my place.
Gotcha.
But you've been approached by the fire departments, and they want to know if the grant is available for cell phones. A lot of them are using cell phones for their fire departments. The way I'm reading it, I said no, but they want me to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see how we could start funding that. You know, mobile CAD we've allowed, you know, that's in the squad cars, you know, as part of the disposition of a 911 call. But I'm not sure we can be in the business of funding radios. And I guess if you want me to take that to an Attorney General or something for a determination or ask around, I can, but I'm not sure. I think if we started funding that, a lot of red flags from the outside would come up.
That's why I'm afraid of it, they want me to ask them. And then big economy is that.
That's some of that imagery discussion that we were talking about. That is allowable now. And like I said, it's our intent to eventually get that statewide imagery service. So then, you know, it's not in our best interest to continue funding an extra $15,000 per county when we're providing. So then we'll go.
Would you cover 100% of the mobile CAD?
We have it. Any other questions on receiving disposition? The statewide radio system, you know, I sent out an email a couple weeks ago. As far as I know, nothing's really changed from our office's perspective. As it's written in 34A, those funds remain available through June of 2017. So the powers that be have some time to get that figured out. And that's about all I'm going to say on that one. As far as I know, nothing has been figured out between the treasurer and the governor's office and DAS and DPS, but that money remains available for that purpose until June 2017. And I talked about the Council of Travel and Public Education. The service plan, because of all of the legislation that was going on, it was delayed getting out. It's now to our public information officers for their final formatting. So basically, what our plan has been, when I took a look at it, there was some language in there that needed to get updated just to basically modernize the document. You know, it's great that we continue to go back to 1988 on the law and why 911 started. I'm not sure that's needed in a service plan. So after we do this revision, that's just going to get some baseline stuff in there that I think we need in there. We're going to look to do a total rewrite next year after the legislative session and try to get some of that more antiquated language and past history out of that and more towards the future on that document. So the updates that are included though in this version, and I think it's always a living, breathing document. You know, if we get it published and you all hate it and give me feedback, well, I'm going to take those changes into account. But they're going to include updates on text 911, CPEs that are tested with TCS or MSRP and SIP, and that is my favorite bullet point ever.
Are you going to have a glossary to go along with it?
That one's rough. Secondary ESInet data centers and then some of the GIS stuff that we've been talking about. There are all the changes that I've already put into the service plan for this year, and like I said, it's basically in our public information officer's hands, just doing the standard department formatting, and then that will get published. And like I said, I'll make sure to send that out far and wide. If there are glaring issues or things you want to talk about, we'll surely open to that because we're going to be revising it again in hopefully about 6 months. The amount of forms that our office generates in this program is a lot. So I'm trying to get that under control a little bit. For the most part, you know, I think in the past there's been a lot of different various versions of forms. There's been Excel spreadsheets, there's been Word documents, there's been PDFs. There's a lot of stuff floating out there. If you're in question about a form, just go to our website. We're going to maintain that as the current most up-to-date place for all the forms. And we're going to try to put it as a PDF, so you don't have to mess around with auto formatting, you don't have to mess around with trying to unlock a spreadsheet. We're going to be PDFs and they're going to be on the website. So a couple things to discuss here though. I've had a few questions asked about the upcoming data expenditure collection sheet. That 12-page document that you basically track all your PSAP expenditures. That is ongoing in the legislation. You know, it's a study done every 2 years, so January 1st, that first study is done. I'll get into that in a second. But that also means that it's ongoing. We're continuing to collect that data. Part of that report and part of that legislation included a review by the auditor's office. So they're doing that now. Maybe some of you have been contacted about that. And I have a meeting with them Wednesday. Because I know there are some suggestions that they want to see made on the form. And I'll cover it here in just a second. So I know some of you want that form now to start working on it, because it's not a quick form to fill out. And I will try to get you something by the end of next week so you guys can start filling that out. I already have some of the changes made, and I'll show you in a second. But I know there's going to be recommended changes, and I want to make those so they don't come out as not finding 2 studies in a row. The next one is I combined the PSAP update form. That's that form where you list your PSAP contact, your wireless contact, and your service board contact. I combined that with a single point of contact sheet that's required by law. And I'll show you these in just a second. And then we already touched a little bit on the carryover grant application, so I'm going to show you now what I've done. On the expenditure collection sheet at the bottom, it's basically a couple extra 6 blocks. It's prepared by and submitted by. That way, if you fax them to me, or I misplace an email but print them off, we know who sent those forms in so the auditors can ask questions. The PSAP update with single point of contact, it looks very similar to the way it used to, other than there is a little checkbox. So if one of these people is also the single point of contact, check that box. 2 forms into one. It's now due January 1st altogether.
What if one of those people is all of those contacts?
Just check it. You know what? Just write it once. Check it though. Check the box. And the carryover grant application. Most of you are familiar with that, but again, just kind of change that. Put a couple drop downs in that application to make it a little bit easier for you while it is still in Excel format. I don't believe Sean Wagner from the ISICS board is here, but it's a project that a few of us have been working on. If you're familiar with CASM, and I'm not exactly sure how far this is going to go. The CASM tool is being used to populate some of the FirstNet information, and there's been some discussions about using kind of a website portal to upload information into CASM that would be separate from CASM. And in the same process, capture some of that information that we continually ask for from our office, so you can update all of those forms, all of that information through that portal instead of using paper copies to submit forms and do it multiple different ways. So like I said, this might be something that you hear about down the road. Not going to spend a whole lot of time about it here, but just kind of wanted to introduce it to you now. All right, a couple of housekeeping items. I've had a few questions asked about the use of surcharge for personnel dollars. That is not legal. You can use personnel dollars for the surcharge for database management and addressing. So the GIS work that you're doing, that's addressing. So you're good there, and you're good with paying a contractor. So our interpretation, and I ran this by the Attorney General and he agreed, contracts for a contractor is, you know, a set, limited time agreement that has timelines, goals, scope of work, and there's an end state. It's not an ongoing open invitation to continue using a contractor to do personnel type work. So I just kind of wanted to cover that. I think everyone's fairly aware that personnel dollars are not to be used for out of surcharge. And that's coming from the legislature. I don't think that they have any intent of funding personnel out of the surcharge. Let's talk the change notification form. I know it gives me headaches every day. Everyone hates it, I hate it. But that's basically what we use to schedule TCS technicians as well. So when you do submit that, I know sometimes you're submitting it a long time in advance. If you can give us a time and a date, that way we can get it on the calendar for a technician. Even if it changes, that's fine. But that's how we schedule the technician to do that work. Any questions on that? Okay. This one's interesting. I don't know how this necessarily came to be. But I told you during the text 911 process, there's a form that you have to fill out for the FCC. And one of the questions on there is, what is your PSAP ID number? And I don't know the history on the number that you seem to have been given, but every time I get it submitted, it's wrong and it's like way off. So I'll send this out, but on the FCC's website, it lists your all's PSAP ID numbers. So like I said, I'll send this out, but it's publicly available as well. It just pulls up a spreadsheet and shows what your PSAP ID number is. And like I said, on those forms that I was getting back, they weren't even close. Most of ours were 1980 something, and I was getting numbers that were all over the place. So just wanted to point that out, and I didn't know if it was like an Iowa ID number or something, but I don't know.
Or the vendor essentially,
And finally, I think most people know this one as well, but I want to cover it because I have some questions. The ICN maintenance notification. Does anyone know what those mean to you? All right. So they look like this. I usually highlight the PSAP that's going to be impacted. That's basically means to you that for that time period, so this is between 10 to 15, but probably for only about 10 minutes total, on that date and time, that your wireless calls will be all routed to your predetermined PSAPs. So your wireline calls will still come through. Your wireless calls are going somewhere. They're just not coming to you. So I've had a lot of questions about that. I've had people ask me, why do you send this to me? I just kind of want to cover what this means. And again, you should know where those wireless calls are going. They're predetermined. But that's kind of what that form means. Any questions on that? Yes,
do
Judy?
you notify the agency that's going to receive those calls so that they know that they're going to be getting them?
I do not.
That's our responsibility.
Yeah. For the most part, yeah, I guess I could probably figure out who they are, but I don't have a readily available on who their all routes are. So yeah, that'd be more on you. And if there ever is a problem with one of those maintenance windows, by all means, let me know. ICN has been pretty easy to work with lately as far as maintenance windows. So let me know if there's a problem with that, and we can try to get that changed. A couple other things. I forgot about this one because I did it last night during the cups in. So we contracted with L.R. Kimball to write the PSAP expenditure report. We wanted an uninterested third party to write that report. We gave them, and we worked with the council members on some of what we wanted to see in that report, some of what we wanted them to take a look at and do some analysis on. But the data is the data, and we've had the data since you submitted it at the end of March. So basically, I took all of your data and put it on a statewide spreadsheet, and without showing you all of the pie charts, I basically pulled the overall roll-up. So on a statewide basis, it was actually remarkably similar between the 2 years. You can kind of see from 911 surcharge, PSAPs pay about 23 to 22% of their expenditures. From general fund, it's 34 and 37. From the Sheriff's Department, it's 16 and 18. And then from other sources of funding, it's 27 and 23, just to give you kind of an idea of where that fell out. And I did those pie charts for all of those categories that you filled out. It's a huge spreadsheet if you're really interested. I did not put them all in this presentation. But it's interesting to see, you know, the various categories that you guys filled out and where the money comes from. So that's some of the data that LR Kimball is going to be analyzing. So it's kind of, like I said, I think it's remarkably similar from year to year, and it's remarkably even. You know, it's about a quarter, give or take, each. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question, and I know it doesn't involve everybody in this room, but are we going to get a chance to talk to the counties that make their own database about the situation?
MediaCom?
Yeah.
I would love to discuss that. Probably not in this forum. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go there after this, that's fine too. I don't know much more from what I think I emailed out last week, but we can certainly talk. We can try to get on the same page. For those that don't know, we've been spending a lot of time working on the wireline side with MediaCom and the stuff that they're doing with database management and how it's affecting the PSAPs. And it's an absolute mess. And it was handled very poorly from their end. I told them that. Any other questions? Yes.
I had one customer
Any other questions? I hear they're putting on a horse race for us right after this, so I'm gonna have to move. If there's nothing else, I'll be here for a while still, so feel free to ask me any questions or any of the Homeland Security staff or GeoCom. So thank you for coming, and hopefully see you guys in the next couple days.